Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is Teacher Ryan, and today we'll be talking about the self in Western and Eastern thoughts. Anyway, if you're new here in my channel, don't forget to click and subscribe and hit the notification down for more updates about this video. So let's get started. At the end of this video, you'll be you will differentiate the concept of self according to Western thoughts against Eastern or Oriental perspectives. Second, explain the concept of self as found in Asian thoughts and create a representation of the Filipino self. So here we'll be looking at the culture perceptions of self in two different ways. Number one is the Western and number two is the Eastern. So the Eastern, as called as Orientals, represents the Asia and the Western represents the Europe and Northern America. Let's begin with the Eastern thoughts of self based on Confucianism. So here it is more on code of conduct of how one should properly act according to the relationship with other people, harmonious social life. Here we can say that in order to understand yourself is to understand what contributions or what effect that you will have in the society to other people, how you establish a good relationship or harmonious relationship with one another. Second is what we call the self-cultivation is seen as the ultimate purpose of life, but the characteristics of a Chun-Tzu, a man of virtue or noble character, is still embedded in his or her social relationship. Here is what we call pakikitungo, how you connect with other people, how you establish harmonious relationship with other people. So this is not just based on your own self, but for the benefit of other people. The cultivated self is a subdued self. What does it mean? It is conditioned to respond to perceptions, not of its own needs and aspirations, but of social requirements and obligations. So, to meet the demands of the society is to let yourself be connected to the norms, to the rules, to the cultural perceptions of the society in order to be part of yourself. So yourself is actually part of the society, your contributions to the society, wherein your personal needs are repressed, not totally given more importance, but here the Confucian society, also the hierarchical for the purpose of maintaining order and balance in society. Next is what we call the Taoism. It is the living in the way of the Tao or the universe. However, the Taoism rejects having one definition of what the Tao is. The self is not just an extension of the family or the community, it is the part of the universe or the forms and manifestation of the Tao. The ideal self is selflessness, but this is not forgetting about the self, it is living a balanced life with society and nature, being open and accepting the change. So, what makes it distinct from Confucianism? The Taoism believes that you are not just an extension of the family or your contribution to the society, but you're actually part of the universe. That you have this contribution that is being selfless, the thinking less about yourself and thinking more of others. Here, it does not mean that you have to forget about yourself, but to maintain balance, understand yourself and how you understand others. So that will actually give you the openness in understanding more about yourself and to accept certain changes. Next is what we call Buddhism. The self is seen as an illusion born out of ignorance of trying to hold and control things or human centeredness. Thus, the self is also the source of all these sufferings. Above and beyond the things that we understand about how we hold and control things around, but these have consequences or part of the choices that we have, and there's what they call corresponding sufferings. And in these sufferings, we tend to have our quest to forget about the self, forget the cravings of the self, break the attachments you have with the world, and to renounce the self, which is the cause of all suffering, in doing so to attain the state of nirvana. So the Buddhism here, it talks about the sufferings, the challenges, the trials that you are facing in your life. So the more you crave, the more you feed, the more it grows, the more you experience suffering. And you need to detach yourself from the world, to renounce yourself, because this will actually lead you to embrace sufferings. In other words, in order to attain certain decisions in our life, is to embrace certain changes, certain sufferings, certain challenges, and that would lead you in having this what they call the nirvana, the ideal perfect state of life, or what they call the paradise. Confucianism and Taoism, the person in striving to a better person does not create a self above the others. So this is not about the more you strive to become better and it does not have an impact with other person. That is totally not the self itself. But the self is to have a beneficial to your community as well as in order and harmony with everything else. Here, there must be certain like you have that ambag or contributions to the community. So if you don't have the ambag or contributions, that will not or that will lessen the way how you understand yourselves. So there must be contributions, beneficialities with one another in order to achieve that kind of harmony. As for Buddhism, the self with all its connections and selfish ideas is totally taken not just out of center of the picture, but out of the picture as a whole. So by looking at the entirely connectedness that you have one another. On the other hand, we have the Western thoughts of self. Western perspective does not discount the role of the environment and society in the formation of the self, but the focus is always looking towards the self. You compare yourself in order to be better. You create associations and bask in the glory of that group for your self-esteem. You put primacy in developing yourself. So this is now the opposite. If the Eastern thoughts would give us way how we understand ourselves by being with one another with other people. Here in Western thoughts, this will give you the idea that in order to understand yourself is to make yourself improve, to make yourself better, to achieve certain success that will actually develop self-esteem. This is more on the focus of the self. Western thought looks at the world in dualities, where you are distinct from one another and you are separate from the creator that you are created. So the Western thoughts basically tell us about duality, that you are unique. You need to compare yourself to other people in order for you to become better, but sometimes it's not true. And there are times that you have to remember that you're actually separated, that you are independent to the creator. Okay? So let's look at now the differences of Western and Eastern thoughts. So the Eastern perspective sees the other person as part of yourself as well as things you may create. So there's a drama in which everyone is interconnected with their specific roles. So there is more on submission to authority. This is actually obeying to the rules of the community. it's not just because the Western perspectives do not anymore follow certain rules, but their focus is more on, yes, there's still obedience, but you have to look at that this is just more about themselves. This is before others. So they cannot understand others without even understanding themselves first. But for Eastern perspectives, you have to understand others in order for you to understand yourself. So for Americans, for example, they talk more about their personal attributes when describing themselves, while Asians in general will talk about their social roles or their social situations, what your job is, how much money you get, how much money you earn, what achievements that your family have in general. So, what contributions or impact that you have for other people. So, this is more on Eastern perspectives. But for Western perspectives, it's more on how you develop yourselves, how you attain a lot of possessions, or even success that you have in college or your jobs. Okay? So they invoke certain traits that they deem positive for themselves. So the evaluation or the assessment of the self also differs, as Americans would highlight their personal achievements, while Asians would rather keep a low profile, as promoting the self can be seen as boastfulness that disrupts social relationships. That's why most Asians would keep a low profile, humble themselves, that will not highlight on the achievements that we have, because this will appear to be boastfulness. But we cannot also blame how Westerners get used to personal attributes of themselves. So these are opposite poles, opposites. The Western culture then is we would call as individualistic culture, since their focus is on the person. Asian culture, on the other hand, is called collectivistic culture, as the group and social relations is given more importance than individual needs and wants. It is true in America, in Western cultures, that the moment you reach 18, the parents would actually let go of their kids to learn independence of themselves, to identify the meaning and purpose of their lives, so that will actually give them the liberty and prerogative to go on their own. But here in Asia, it's the opposite. Even if you're already married, or even you are not yet married at the age of 30, you're still in the custody of your parents. Though you can actually have your own life, but there is more emotional attachment with your parents, with your grandparents. Some of us will still live in in the family without getting away from your own family members. Okay, so the Asian culture, okay, group and social relations is given more importance than individual needs and wants. By valuing the individual, Westerners may seem to have loose associations or even loyalty to their groups. Competition is the name of the game, and they are more likely straightforward and forceful in their communication as well as decision making. So the Westerners tend to be explicit in their communication. In other words, they tend to be straightforward, forceful, and they do not hide something implicit message. They would say the specific way as possible, as clear, to transmit the communication, the messages that they would like to imply. On the other hand, Asians would actually say a lot of things but to actually mean the same thing. So there's a popular Facebook meme that there are two flags. One is for the American and one is for the Philippines. One would say, the American would say, take care. But for the Filipinos, we have a lot of things to say, like you have to you have to write a letter. When you reach there, you would actually write a letter for us, or don't forget us, give us pasalubong or something like a kind of gift, no, that would actually still come back, right? So we have a lot of things like I love you, and then for the Filipino would say I know that you have so many reasons to love me. So see, we tend to say many things. In other words, we tend to say many things, but actually we just want to let to mean the same thing and hoping that that person will feel what we want to say. So we tend to have an implicit message of communication. We don't directly tell because that is a kind of impoliteness or perhaps a kind of parang not being straightforward because we want to be as polite as possible, and that is one thing that we want to do, or even we're accustomed to that. And as we can see, Westerners tend to be specific, tend to be straightforward. So see, there are different thoughts how we understand oneself. The Westerners also emphasize more on the value of equality, even if they see that the individual can rise above everything else. They also promote ideas of fair competition and protect the individuals. As Asians, with their collective regard puts more emphasis on the hierarchy, as the culture wants to keep things in harmony and in order. Westerners would most likely call their boss, parents, or other seniors by their first name. Hey Joe, but for us we say sir or ma'am. So there is a honorifics, no? Because that is the way how we respect, no, elders, seniors, and a lot of workers would just dare not go, no, ranking officials. So we tend to, for example, we we if especially if we don't know the person, we actually say sir or ma'am. But the Americans would actually ask for their names. So what your name is, and then they will actually address it by first name. Now, here in the Philippines, how we create a representation of the Filipino self is by considering that we are actually once colonized by Americans, and we somehow adapted that kind of Western thoughts of the self, and we still retain the majority how we think much of other people rather than for ourselves. So we might also vary, no, from one place to another, like provinces, regions, due to geographical conditions. So we have the social media, migrations, intermarriages, variety between the Easterners, Westerners, and Asians. Perceptions may either be blurred or highlighted. Conflict is inevitable in diversity. Peace also possible, no, through understanding of where each one of us is coming from. So in order to achieve peace is to understand the commonality that we have, regardless of our differences. So the reason why we study this in understanding oneself in Western and Eastern, for us to know that how they look at, or how they define, or how they give importance of themselves, like being more on their personal attributes. But for Eastern, this is more on the benefit of other people. In conclusion, the self in Western and Eastern thoughts varies from one place to another. So the reason why, especially for Filipinos, and if you tend to go abroad, so you will not experience culture shock or the way how they live their lives, because that's more on giving highlighting their personal attributes, no, of their success. But as we think more of other people than thinking ourselves. So I hope that this lesson will give us the idea that we have different ways how we understand ourselves depending on the cultural perceptions, either in Western thought or Eastern thought. And I hope to see you on my next video. And if you have any questions, You may now type, or you may type your views, opinions on the comment section below, and I will try my best to really answer your your queries. Right? So see you next time, and God bless